Mr. Speaker, as you remember, you wrote the foreword to Rick Perry's most recent book called Fed Up, and you called him, quote, uniquely qualified to explain what's taking place with the economy. Does that mean in terms of job creation credentials he has your proxy at a gathering like this?
No, but it means if he wants to write another book, I'll write another foreword. As he himself, look, he said himself, that was an interesting book of ideas by somebody who's not proposing a manifesto for president. And I think to go back and try to take that apart is silly. But let me just use my time for a second, if I might, Brian. I served during the Reagan campaign with people like Jack Kemp and Art Laffer. We had an idea for job creation. I served as a freshman or as a sophomore helping pass the Reagan Jobs Program. At Newt.org, I put out last Friday the response to the Obama stagnation. The fact is, if you took the peak of the Reagan unemployment, which he inherited from Carter, by last Friday, going month by month, under Ronald Reagan, we'd have 3,700,000 more Americans working. When I was Speaker, we added 11 million jobs in a bipartisan effort, including welfare reform, the largest capital gain tax cut in history. We balanced the budget for 4 straight years. The fact that President Obama doesn't come to the Reagan Library to try to figure out how to create jobs, doesn't talk to any of these 3 governors to learn how to create jobs, doesn't talk to Herman Cain to learn how to create jobs, tells you that this is a president so committed to class warfare and so committed to bureaucratic socialism that he can't possibly be effective in jobs.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The questioning. 30 seconds. I have another line of questioning. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to go back, Frank, to the Homeland Security question, because it's important for us to confront this. I helped develop the model for Homeland Security. It hasn't been executed well. The fact is, we have enemies who want to use weapons against us that will lead to disasters on an enormous scale. And the original goal was to have a Homeland Security Department that could help us withstand up to 3 nuclear events in one morning. And we need to understand, there are people out there who want to kill us, and if they have an ability to sneak in weapons of mass destruction, they're going to use them. We need to overhaul and reform the department, but we need some capacity to respond to massive events that could kill hundreds of thousands of Americans in one morning.
Speaker Gingrich, this reminds me of Race to the Top, the Obama administration education program. You supported it. Governor Perry opted out. Some people don't like it. What did you like about it?
I liked it very much the fact that it talked about charter schools. It's the one place I found to agree with President Obama. If every parent in America had a choice of the school their child went to, if that school had to report its scores, if there was a real opportunity, you'd have a dramatic improvement. I visited schools where 3 years earlier there were fights, there were dropouts, there was no hope. They were taken over by a charter school in downtown Philadelphia, and all of a sudden the kids didn't fight anymore because they were disciplined. They were all asked every day, what college are you going to? Not are you going to go to college, what college are you going to? And so I am very much in favor of school choice. My personal preference would be to have a Pell Grant for K through 12 so that every parent could pick with their child any school they wanted to send them to, public or private, and enable them to have the choice. I don't think you're ever going to reform the current bureaucracies. And the president was, I thought, showing some courage in taking on the teachers union to some extent in offering charter schools. And I wanted, frankly, to encourage more development towards choice.
What specifically, in your mind, would make the border secure?
Well, the first thing you need to do is have boots on the ground. We've had a request into this administration since January of 2009 for 1,000 Border Patrol agents, or National Guard troops, and working towards 3,000 Border Patrol. That's just on the Texas border. There's another 50% more for the entire Mexican border. So you can secure the border, but it requires a commitment of the federal government of putting those boots on the ground, the aviation assets in the air. We think Predator drones could be flown, that real-time information coming down to the local and the state and the federal law enforcement, and you can secure the border. And at that particular point in time, then you can have an intellectually appropriate discussion about immigration reform. For the President of the United States to go to El Paso, Texas, and say that the border is safer than it's ever been, either he has some of the poorest intel of a president in the history of this country, or he was an abject liar to the American people. It is not safe on that border.
Governor Gingrich, your perception on immigration reform, and you've been, I think, in some ways a little different on your initial position.
Well, look, I think we have to find a way to get to a country in which everybody who's here is here legally. But you started by referencing President Reagan.
That's right.
In 1986, I voted for the Simpson-Mazzoli Act, which in fact did grant some amnesty in return for promises. President Reagan wrote in his diary that year that he signed the act because we were going to control the border and we were going to have an employer program where it was a legal guest worker program. That's in his diary. I'm with President Reagan. We ought to control the border. We ought to have a legal guest worker program. We ought to outsource it, frankly, to American Express, Visa, and MasterCard so there's no counterfeiting, which there will be with the federal government. We should be very tough on employers once you have that legal program. We should make English the official language of government. We should insist that first-generation immigrants who come here learn American history in order to become citizens. We should also insist that American children learn American history. And then we have to find a way to deal with folks who are already here, some of whom, frankly, been here 25 years, are married with kids, live in our local neighborhood, go to our church. It's got to be done in a much more humane way than thinking you're going to automatically deport millions of people.
Speaker Gingrich, Chairman of the Federal Reserve Ben Bernanke will come to the end of his term in 2014. Would you reappoint Ben Bernanke?
I would fire him tomorrow.
Why?
I think he's been the most inflationary, dangerous, and power-centered chairman of the Fed in the history of the Fed. I think the Fed should be audited. I think the amount of money that he has shifted around in secret with no responsibility, no accountability, no transparency is absolutely antithetical to a free society. And I think his policies have deepened the depression, lengthened the problems, increased the cost of gasoline, and been a disaster. But I want to take the rest of my time, Brian, to go back to a question you asked that was very important, because we were asked the wrong question at the last debate. The question isn't, would we favor a tax increase? The question is, how would we generate revenue? There are three good ways. The Ronald Reagan technique, put 3,700,000 more people back to work as of last Friday. You reduce government spending. You raise government revenues enormously. The Committee of 12 ought to be looking at how do you create more revenue, not how do you raise taxes. Second, you go to energy, exactly as Michelle Bachmann has said. You open up American energy, $500 billion a year here at home, enormous increase in federal revenue. Third, we own, with all due respect, Governor, we own 69% of Alaska. That's 1.5 Texases.
Yes, sir.
Now let's set a half Texas aside for national parks. We could liberate an area the size of Texas for minerals and other development. That would raise even more revenue, not the normal Washington viewpoint.